Unless there is a change of mind, the planned nationwide warning strike by the Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC) over the worsening economic situation in the country will begin on Tuesday, which is today. At a media briefing after a meeting with the leaders of the Trade Union Congress, the Minister of Labour and Employment, Simon Lalong, appealed to the organised labour to shelve the strike in the interest of Nigerians in order to allow all stakeholders to work towards an amicable resolution of the contending issues. The NLC had taken the decision to embark on the warning strike after its National Executive Council (NEC) meeting on Thursday last week. However, the Trade Union Congress was not party to that decision. It has now agreed to a 2-week grace for the government to act.
At the end of our discussions, we identified certain issues that will require immediate attention in order to stabilize and also with a smooth implementation of the subsidy removal, especially on palliatives. And so many hanging issues that were already discussed with Mr. President, which we are going to carry over from here. So now, for a period of about 2 weeks, so that we can address those issues and bring it back again for further discussion.
For us in TUC, as part of the communique that we circulated a while ago, that we are also going to monitor to see how the states are implementing some of these. Because again, if we think that federal government are the ones that will implement everything, it may be a bit difficult because we know that these monies have been sent to states. How are they implementing it? So we're going to place an eye on that. And that was why in our communique we stated clearly that we are going to set up a monitoring team across the 36 states of the Federation to see how they have been implemented. If there are any states that are short-changing the Nigerian masses, we will move our arsenals to sustain. So after all the deliberation, we were pushing that these things could be resolved within 7 days, but also listening to the constraints from government. Again, we also need to be pragmatic. That this week, as we know, the president is outside the country and will be returning maybe sometime weekend or early next week, and that Federal Assembly Council meetings will be held next week where some presentations will be made. And that the most reasonable time for them to get back to us is 2 weeks. So we are also going to go back to our NAC, the National Administrative Council of TUC, and also address them on the fallout of this meeting.
Today, warning strike begins today, Rufai.
Yeah, warning strike begins today. Pretty much, when you look at the roads, it was still business as usual. Yeah, I don't know if the banks that were claiming were going to join them. I'm not sure the banks joined them. I'm not sure other people also, joined the strike. It doesn't look like there's a strike out there. But why are we constantly here? We're constantly here because of government. The same government that makes a lot of promises that reneges in it. And I'll tell you how. Everybody, prior to elections, clamor for the removal of subsidy. But one other thing we said is the fact that subsidy must be, one, either removed in phases, two, palliatives put in place to be able to cushion the effects. None of these two scenarios were done. Subsidy was pulled out like a carpet pulled out of the leg of Nigerians with nothing to cushion the effects. Then the agitation started by the NLC to meet with the government. But government did show bad faith in most of the conversations. We remember the 8 weeks provision they gave that they were going to negotiate. And all of a sudden, the government was not talking to NLC again. And TUC, until they said they were going to go on the strike. Then the quickest thing the government did was to go to the industrial court to get an injunction so that they don't go to strike. When they got that ceased for a bit. The NLC had to threaten another strike for them to be able to vacate, taking them to court. Because at some point, they threatened another strike and they said it was contempt because it's an earlier court decision. So we've gone ding-dong up and down for a while. And the Nigerian people continue to suffer. Yes, the argument is government have pulled out palliatives. Like the TUC chair there was talking, and he was saying, yeah, let's see how they distribute the palliatives. But the other argument as regards the palliatives is it far-reaching enough? Obviously not. When will others kick in? When will this new minimum wage for workers kick in? When will this conversation happen? So from having that 8 work weeks agreement timeline to be able to facilitate appropriate palliative. Government has reneged on that, and government has also shown bad faith. What really brought this strike to the front burner was there was a call for a peace meeting, and the Minister of Labour was quoted to have gone to say some unsavory things against the Labour Congress. So they say we are going to go all out. It goes back to the question, why are we having strikes? Because government feels its responsibility. Do not get me wrong. It's not that we are not going to have challenges in trade disputes, but the government must also show good faith in all of this conversation. The government must show care and concern to the pain facing a lot of Nigerians and the workers. And you minimum wage has been argued, where have we gotten to as regards that? So we've circled round, and that's why NLC keeps saying we'll have nothing to result to but strike. The effectiveness of the strike remains to be seen. It's out there in the public. Can you see any strike? Can you see anything going on? But one thing has to be said. The government in all of this has not shown good faith. And I said that deliberately 3 times so it sinks in. At the moment we start to do it, we can start to rest these issues of public rift and rancor among government and LLC.
Well, it looks really very untidy, particularly when you consider the fact that what NLC is putting on the table is what it calls total strike for 2 days, warning strike. Second time on this same issue of removal of fuel subsidy that the Nigerian Labour Congress will be going on warning strike. There was a 2-day warning strike, which was suspended. Now this is going to be the next one. The difference between this one and the last one is that, as reported in the papers, about 52 affiliate unions connected with the NLC are part of this, including the Maritime Workers Union of Nigeria, including NOBIFIE, which is the umbrella body for banks and financial institutions, including the Joint Action for Civil Society Organizations. So, if all of these people were to down tools, imagine the implications in terms of productivity, in terms of cost for businesses and all the persons that will be involved. And this could have been avoided. It could have been avoided if government had responded appropriately to Labour. When the fuel subsidy removal was announced, Labour put, in the course of a few meetings with the federal government, a number of conditions on the table, including, reversal to status quo, antebellum, including palliatives, including investment in the education sector, including provision of alternatives like, CNG-driven fuel, repair of the refineries, and all of that. And government promised at the time that it was going to set up a tripartite committee that will address the grievances of organized labor. Up to this moment, that has not happened. What had happened after the last the last warning strike that Nigerian Labour Congress and TUC at the time embarked upon, was that the Office of the Solicitor General felt compelled to remind Labour that there was a subsisting order of the Industrial Court, which has said, look, all the parties involved should maintain the status quo and that Labour should not go on strike. And Labour then came out and said, look, next time the federal government tries to use the court to stop it from protesting on behalf of the Nigerian people, that it will not listen to it at all. And so here we are today. The only special development that we have seen is that government seems to have succeeded in dividing the ranks of organized labor. The meeting that was called for 3:30 p.m. yesterday, only the president of the Trade Union Congress showed up. The Nigerian Labour Congress did not show up. And that meeting started around 5:30. The outcome of which had been reported to me that, okay, TUC is saying it will give government another 2 weeks. Okay, what is the guarantee that within the next 2 weeks, government will be able to reach or even meet organized labor halfway on the contentious issues on the table? But in any case, that's the strategy of government, divide and rule. So today is day one of the warning strike, the 2-day warning strike. We'll see what develops. But what we know is that state branches of the NLC had also called out their people yesterday. NOBIFIE had also issued a statement. But will the strike work? Will government listen? Beyond Simon Lalong, the Minister for Labour and Employment, who have been appealing and saying government should be allowed to settle down. Well, government has spent in office already about 100 days. And he was saying, well, the ministers just came into office, they should be allowed to settle down. When are they going to settle down? And how determined is organized labor and those civil society organizations in compelling government to address the grievances of Nigerians who continue to insist that they are groaning. Now, the federal government has given 5 billion naira each to all the 36 states. Well, that in itself is curious. By what formula did the federal government arrive at the wisdom that each state deserves 5 billion naira? Lagos State of 20 million people has been given 5 billion naira. Ekiti State of maybe about 3 million people, has also been given 5 billion naira. So even in terms of what government claims that it is doing, there isn't any logic to it. In some of the states, attempts have been made to buy buses or to distribute rice. Okay, for how many days can one family consume a bag of rice? What is that sustainable solution that government can put on the table? But at the end of the day, it's the same people that are groaning that will lose heavily, because if the system is shut down, productivity will be affected, jobs will be affected, our suffering will continue.
Yes, it's almost like a choice between the devil and the deep blue sea in terms of the government not responding and NLC, organized labor, threatening to go on strike, and the impact either ways on the people. That's the major concern. But going back to federal government's attempt to have a dialogue with organized labor, to appeal to them, to give them 2 weeks extra to deliver on some of the things that they're agitating for, and going on a 2-day warning strike. As already has been observed, I don't know, in many parts, it looks as if things have remained calm, and the number of organizations, the banks, ASUP, the electricity providers whom the organized labor had said would join them on this strike haven't quite done so. So this morning, coming into work, it seemed like business as usual. So the extent to which there will be adherence or obedience to this call for a 2-day warning strike would be best seen at the end of day one. Now, as we approach the 100 days in office of President Bola Tinubu, it's important to note that despite his announcement on the 29th of May, 2023, that subsidy was gone, we haven't still had, as has been said a number of times, palliatives, especially for the people, that is commensurate to the sufferings or the hardship being faced by the people. Yes, 5 billion naira has been released. Yes, seed has been released to farmers. But in terms of the increase in the cost of transportation for workers, and that's one of the agitations, the communique that was released by TUC following the meeting addressed. They talked about, one, the wage award hasn't yet been talked about. Minimum wage still stands at 30,000 naira. And fuel price has gone up more than 3 times. Wage still remains the same. Cost of food inflation, is there nothing to reflect that for the workers? So no decisive action. In fact, they compared the federal government's response to that of the state governments, where some state governments have announced what they would do for their civil servants. Don't forget that it would only affect state civil servants and not federal government workers. They also brought into light, and I'll end here, the tax freeze, freezing of tax for some categories of civil servants, as well as other allowances to help to alleviate and cushion the effect. They're saying that the word was pragmatic. Okay, they understand that government, understanding the challenges that government faces. So they're willing to still go back to the negotiation table, which I believe in terms of the interest of the people is commendable. But government also has to be honorable and be full of integrity, so that when they make promises like this, in 2 weeks' time, they indeed have done something or provided the solution that organized labor is agitating for. We'll continue to give you updates on this particular story as it emerges. In a major departure from the decision against live coverage of proceedings, the presidential petition judgment will be televised. For the first time in Nigeria's history, the Presidential Election Court will allow video cameras into court to provide a live telecast of its judgment on the petitions challenging the electoral victory of President Bola Tinubu. Arise correspondent Godfrey Eshemoge has more.
September 6 is D-Day in the Nigerian judiciary under the current administration. is the date that the 5-member panel of the Presidential Election Petition Court, headed by Justice Haruna Samani, will decide on petitions challenging the victory of Bola Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress (APC) on the outcome of the February 25 polls. Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and Peter Obi of the Labour Party, as well as the Allied People's Movement (APM), are seeking to nullify the election's outcome. Atiku and Obi had called 40 of the 150 witnesses they had listed. These alongside loads of documents tendered to prove their case that Mr. Tinubu wasn't the winner, citing a number of reasons including INEC acting in breach of the Electoral Act and allegations of forgery, dual citizenship, and drug trafficking leveled against Mr. Tinubu. But Tinubu, who is now Nigeria's president, denied the charges against him by the PDP, LP, and APM petitions throughout the hearing. Earlier in the proceedings, which kicked off on May 8th, both the PDP and Labour Party presidential candidates had applied to the court to allow a live telecast of events to give a sense of transparency and fairness to the public. But the call to allow the cameras failed, with the court stating on May 22 that doing so will amount to making the proceedings one big circus show, adding that the Nigerian constitution doesn't permit it.
The court, in its wisdom, decided that the subject of our application, i.e. the live streaming and open telecast, is not in any way connected with the merits of our petition. The petition is separate, it's ongoing. The application did not succeed to have the televised version of the proceedings relate to the entire world. And as far as we are concerned, we are now set for hearing.
And the observers say it was highly unlikely that the court will make a U-turn, but they have now been proven wrong. As the days of waiting turned into weeks, a sense of despondency and frustration began to build, translating to hashtags such as, quote, "Eyes on the judiciary," "Tell us the date," and so on. Finally, the long wait is over. The date is now known. September 6 has been set aside as D-Day after huge fireworks during the hearing. And in an astonishing turn of events, the court has finally made a U-turn by allowing the cameras in, but with the proviso that the faces of judges won't be shown. The judicial authorities say allowing the cameras into the courtroom is to reduce the number of anxious Nigerians that may want to storm the court on Wednesday to hear the verdict for themselves, possibly overwhelming the capacity of the Temple of Justice. Legal experts say allowing the cameras in the courtroom is a significant development in the country's judiciary, but that what will be more significant yet is Wednesday's decision and the ultimate decider upon a possible appeal at the Supreme Court by any of the parties on who actually won the 2023 presidential election. Godfrey Eshamoge, Arise News.
Wednesday, the 6th of September, which is tomorrow's Judgment Day. Rufai.
Oh, yeah. Let's look at it. Let's say it pans out Wednesday. Day has finally been decided. We all know what all the candidates brought forth. The case up for determination will be across 3 political parties, APM. That talks about the nomination of Kashim Shettima as the running mate to President Tinubu. Then we all know the case of Peter Obi, another extensive one that talked about the potpourri of issues, and Atiku Abubakar also talked about potpourri of issues about including the forfeiture, trying to seek the court's understanding as regards if somebody that has forfeited, in the case in America, about $460,000 USD, can run for presidency, and also everything that happened around the elections, both candidates say they claim they are the winners of the elections. Let's see how the court, I don't want to go back into, because the court has reserved a date. The date is tomorrow. We're going to see a telecast. But I think in going forward, a couple of ideas I'd like to throw around. After we had the 2007 elections, which Omar Musa Yar'Adua, then president, said the elections that brought me were fraught with a lot of irregularities, and he did something about it, set up the waste reports. There were many recommendations made. Part of the recommendation was, number one, that the president should not be the one to determine who will become INEC chief. I think we must look back at those recommendations if we want to truly deepen democracy. The INEC chief must not be from the president. We must be able to find a method where we get who is going to head INEC to be able to make it truly independent. And secondly, we must also conclude everything in our electoral litigation before swearing in. It has to be said. Because once swearing in is done, a lot of people argue that it's just sort of like a fait accompli. So if we can use a model where we have a special court and it goes through that process as regards presidential, litigations before swearing in, we can't do that. And we can't do that because when you look at it, from election day to swearing in day, you still have like a 3-month window. So can we do it within the 3-month window? If election was concluded on 25th and we got the results maybe before March, April, May, ending of May swearing in. So we have that 3-month window, we can do a lot. So because this idea of we have to go to court with our electoral process and everything, it just makes our elections and the right of the people to be able to elect their leaders suspect. Let us make it about the people and let us bolster our electoral process. I think those are those 2 recommendations I'll put forward.
Okay, 1 month, 4 days after the presidential election petition court concluded hearings in the matter of the presidential election of February 25, the court has now said that it will deliver its judgment tomorrow. One popular phrase around the place has been all eyes on the judiciary. In a literal sense, all eyes will be on the judiciary tomorrow because expectations are very high. People waiting on the outcome of that process and what would be, declared, the findings of the 5-person panel led by Justice Samani, who is the leader of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Now, the PDP is hoping that it will get victory. The Labour Party and supporters of Mr. Obi have all been saying that, tomorrow the tribunal will rule in their favor. Number 3, the ruling APC is saying that the president is confident because he trusts the judiciary so much that, in fact, as the tribunal is delivering its judgment tomorrow, President Tinubu will be far away in India, in New Delhi, attending, on the sidelines, attending events on the sidelines of the G20 summit, and also perhaps the B20 that is led by, the chairman of UBA, Tony Elumero. Wow. Okay. So, what are the concerns that we have seen? One, the security agencies have said security will be very tight tomorrow, not just in Abuja, where the judgment will be delivered, but also in other parts of the country. And that all troublemakers should beware, because both the DDI, the police, and other security agencies, they are on strong alert to prevent any kind of misconduct. Number 2, the court itself, speaking through the registrar, has said that, look, staff of the Court of Appeal should go on vacation tomorrow. They don't have to come to work tomorrow. And that in any case, the persons that will come there will have to be strictly persons that have accreditation, including staff that will have to be unpicked by management, and also counsel. And at least one of the legal teams has published a list of just 8 names of 4 members of the inner bar and 4 members of the outer bar who will represent, in this particular case, the APC, so that the courtroom will not be overcrowded. Number 3, we've also been told that the broadcast, the proceedings will be televised. And I think that will gladden the hearts of many Nigerians who have been saying, look, they want to be part of this. And that's a ruling that Nigerians will be interested in very much tomorrow. However, our point will be that whatever the outcome of that tribunal, it is important that all parties involved respect the ruling of the court. And the process is not concluded tomorrow. And that is the rub of it. You can still go on appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. What it means is that as the matter could then go to the higher court, to the apex court, you could have the processes continue till maybe about February next year, which then provides a justification for those persons who said, look, a government gets into power, you are in court, determining the legitimacy or otherwise of the election. Meanwhile, the Tinubu administration has spent over about 100 days. He is already chairman of ECOWAS. He is already gone to African Union. He is on his way to G20. So in other words, so it's convenient for the man that is elected to play rose garden politics. So So the residual point is that we need to return in reviewing the electoral framework for Nigeria to some of those concerns that have been raised about qualification, about the determination of election petitions. Otherwise, the court can just hide under technicalities and continue on it till, the 180 days stipulated by the Constitution, expires.
Well, it seems like the judiciary has listened to the calls by a number of people that all eyes on the judiciary in another context, in terms of opening up their doors to video cameras and a live streaming of the proceedings tomorrow when they deliver judgment. I think this is quite important because I wish they'd done this earlier when this case had come before the courts at the beginning of this petition tribunal, because what happened in the interim was that we then had people who were acting as pseudo-reporters, and a lot of news and fake news was flying around. Some people would give account of what happened, different. So perhaps they didn't put that into consideration, that by preventing media from showing the true account of what transpired in courts, it gave room for, counter fake news to be the order of the day. So this would be avoided tomorrow when judgment is delivered, and everyone can watch live by themselves without depending on reported accounts of what transpired in court. So good one for the courts. Now, in terms of all eyes being on the judiciary, it's a fine moment for the judiciary in Nigeria to demonstrate that it is indeed an institution that can be trusted, an institution that is that it has integrity, an institution that will uphold the rule of law. Irrespective of how the judgments will come out, what Nigerians are looking forward to is that the justices would indeed consider the matter on the merit of the case, which of course they are more than qualified to do. So there's no doubt about that in that area. I believe that all eyes will be on their screens tomorrow. Arise TV will definitely be showing that proceeding. And at the end of the day, finally, I just want to say that, as Dr. Bati had mentioned, every party, each of the parties believe that they ought to come out victorious following tomorrow's judgment announcement. However, irrespective of how it turns out, I do hope that Nigerians will take on the path of the law rather than resort to any other, taking laws into their own hands. We hope that people will address the courts, perceive there's an opportunity to appeal if it doesn't go in the favor of any particular parties. But again, we trust that the judiciary will do right, not just by the candidates, but by Nigerians as a whole.